Hey, I'm Anna.
And I'm Shannon. We've been friends for over a decade and have always enjoyed entertaining each other with our own rather personal stories, some hilarious, some embarrassing, some mundane, and some heartbreaking, but always as honest as possible.
I think we afford each other a soft place to land, without judgment and a whole lot of levity. Please be reminded that this podcast deals with mature topics and is intended for an adult audience. Additionally, we sometimes discuss graphic and disturbing content, which may prove distressing for some listeners, in addition to your hosts.
For sure. Before we get into this episode, a quick note about our creative process. The podcast is titled The Assignment because it describes how we develop each episode and speaks to our shared love of the written word.
We find a topic that we feel strongly about, develop a list of questions to explore in depth, and then go our separate ways and write answers to each question. We do the writing independently, so we're not influenced by the other's opinions, waiting to share it with each other until just before we sit down to record.
In this episode, we talk about the changing views of spirituality, both individually and as a society. For many, this means moving away from more organized religion towards esoteric exploration of consciousness and intuition. And for us, it simply means asking ourselves a few honest questions about the topic.
That's right. So let's dive in, Shannon, and let's start with you, shall we? Question 1. What is morality to you, and how is your moral framework formed?
Big question.
I know. Right off the top.
Not starting with a softball, are we?
I don't think any of them are.
I have distinct memories of being morally unformed as a child. What I think sometimes that's overlooked when we think about childhood is how monumental some of the ideas children are forced to grapple with as a result of being new humans. Death is one. Understanding where babies come from, that's another. And the biggest of them all, I think, is morality, because we want what we want when we want it, without limitations or consequences. And explaining why that is not possible to a child is the reason that people liken the tantrums of toddlers to the fervor wrought by revolutionary tyrants. There's actually articles about this, how similar those two things actually are. Because you have to learn to care about people other than yourself. And then you have to learn how to respect them. And this is the beginning of morality school. I feel it takes place primarily in your relationship with your caregivers. And then it fans out to siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and then other children at school, teachers, and finally friends. You have to consider these other people. You have to try not to hurt them or lie to them or betray them. You have to consider that they have feelings just like you have feelings. And my first memory of wrestling with this was noticing how many times that I lied in a day. Because at the age of around 6 years old, my lying was pathological.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I found it was way more fun to lie than tell the truth, because a lie could be anything. You know, telling tall tales was my way to get myself something that I really liked, which was attention. And I still do. I used to count the number of times that I lied in a day. And when I got caught in one of my many untruths, I felt the flip side of doing something wrong, which was horrible shame. And in the most rudimentary way, I learned that wrong actions come with bad feelings when caught.
There is that.
And that sometimes just because something was fun, it didn't make it okay to do. And I guess that was my foundation.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate to admit it, but the nuances of morality for me was really informed by sitcom television in the 1980s.
You're not alone there.
I am pure Gen X. I mean, we've talked about this on many episodes, but I feel like I was in part raised by a television. So I watched Growing Pains, Full House, Family Ties, dare I say, The Cosby Show.
You dare.
Morality school was ambiguous. And I watched those shows around between the ages of like 6 and 10. And they were always about kids learning lessons for the most part. You know, I didn't have any sort of religious upbringing. My parents were each other's second spouse, which was apparently a huge problem for the Catholic Church in the 1980s. So we weren't, quote unquote, welcome in the church.
Ooh.
Yeah. which I am mostly pleased with. I asked my mother what our religion was one day because I had friends that, all went to church on Sundays. And she sort of rather flippantly told me that it was skiing because that's what we did on Sunday.
I mean, I can think of worse things.
Yeah. So for me, what then replaced the foregoing of a religious upbringing? How do we determine right versus wrong? Well, the big stuff is easy. Thou shalt not murder, cheat, steal, covet thy neighbor's wife. You didn't need to sit in church on Sundays to know how to function in society. The nuances were mostly chiseled out by, I would say, foundational friendships. Sometimes really by trial and error.
A lot of the time by trial and error.
Yeah, that's right. Especially at that age. I'm thinking like the preteen years, especially for girls. Friendships with girls are basically a PhD in morality at that age. My friendships with my girlfriends in my early teen years were carried out in letters, like those of 19th century poets, but with prettier markers and stickers.
Oh, so flowery.
Oh, yeah. We were always writing these letters to each other about, trying to be good friends and trying to be good daughters and good students. And we investigated all matters with such a fine-tooth comb, and we held each other to account on everything. That age, you're so idealistic, you have such a clear sense of what is right and what is wrong, that idealism. We never worried about taking ourselves or our lives too seriously. It all felt so important. And then I got into my older teen years, where the moral compass started to get a little wonky. Wilder years, later adolescence, early 20s, you're mixing values with boys and alcohol and hardcore partying. And I have very distinct memories, sometimes disturbing ones, of that age and realizing that I was doing something that I said I would never do. Stealing a friend's boyfriend, slandering somebody behind their back, vandalism, other petty crimes that will remained nameless on this podcast. But it was a long list. And I sort of got lost at some point in that phase. And the meaning of morality to me got pretty murky. Yeah. So I was probably in first year university, and I remember taking a class entitled Contemporary Moral Issues. It was a philosophy course. And it was amazing. We read Aristotle and other philosophers and then attacked modern issues of the day, like abortion, income inequality, euthanasia, infidelity, terrorism, civil disobedience, you name it, using the framework of philosophical arguments. And I felt it was brilliant. I remember getting sent home with like scenarios about what would you do if, and one in particular I remember was, what would you do if you saw a friend's boyfriend or girlfriend cheating on them? Would you tell your friend? Is it your duty to tell your friend?
Would you? Was it?
I know, right? You're hooked already.
I am.
Yeah. Because, we can all have our opinions on the big moral conundrums of the day, and I do. But what if having a certain set of values costs you something? What if it's inconvenient? What if you lose friends because of it? What if it puts you in actual danger? And this is where we test our so-called morality and see what the resilience of our alleged values actually are. I know where I stand on the big issues that are being debated fiercely today. And if you want,
okay,
we can do a rapid fire Contemporary Moral Issues 2025 version.
Ooh, this feels like a game show, and I kind of appreciate this delivery. Thank you. So do you want me to feed you the topic, Shannon?
Yes.
Okay, so true to our mandate, heavy topics with a little levity. So first up, on Shannon's 2025 Moral Issues bingo card, abortion. Go.
Pro.
Okay.
I am a feminist and therefore feel women have the right to choose whether they want to be mothers. I am also child-free by choice. I think kids are great when they are not mine. And any government that takes away that choice from a woman puts them in the category of a second-class citizen, basically treating them like cattle. So just so everyone's clear, if the government took away my right to choose, I would stop paying taxes.
Fair. Next up, income inequality.
Against. Hard against. My opinion, large multinational corporations have too much power and are sucking the life out of our economic system, creating large-scale hopelessness. They are like insidious succubuses, feeding on smaller corporations, consolidating power, buying politicians, seeping into every corner of possibility and blotting it out. I am not an economist, but I don't think you need to be an economist to understand that if a company's sole goal is growing their profits in perpetuity, then some pretty shitty and immoral choices need to be made along the way to sustain that. As the kids say these days, the math ain't mathing. The people at the top have become addicted to both power and greed, and the people at the bottom have basically given up. And both extreme ends of this income scale, the extremely rich and the extremely poor, are feeding from the middle in order to survive. And the people in the middle are, with each passing year, becoming more overworked and underpaid as a result. And one day, these middlers are going to give up too. Once that happens, then people understand that they will never benefit from a system that they are contributing to. They will stop participating in it. We do not want that. That is when the revolution happens. And in many places, it's already happening. And I think we know where those places are. And as the famous saying goes, the revolution will not be televised because the extremely rich own the press too. And so we need to find increasingly sneaky ways to communicate to each other in order to mobilize. That's not what's happening. I'm not dog whistling.
You should have seen the look I just gave her.
I feel obviously strongly about this topic, and I have long felt that income inequality is and will be the most important issue of our generation. And I hope I'm right. I also think that it bears mentioning that as we get older and we have more skin in the game, our opinion on the above gets a little cloudy and less idealistic, because we also wish to identify with those on the upward portion of the scale, which is silly.
But we do.
But we do. I think it's a way of feeling that we have been successful. And I don't think anyone living and working in 2025 should feel successful if we are handing the younger generations less wealth than we had. We have all failed by sticking our collective heads in the sand and not addressing the big fat elephant in the room. It's corporate greed. That's it. That's the whole problem in a nutshell. Not climate change, not corrupt politicians, or polarization, or the failure of globalization. None of it. None. It's the corporations, period.
Well, as a middler myself and one that has worked in the service industry for the entirety of my career, it's pretty frightening to imagine what things are going to look like in the coming years and what they're already becoming. Good luck traveling, eating out at a restaurant, or finding a human in retail or customer service. Everyone wants something for nothing and is quite happy to do it off the backs of the workers supplying that service or product. Mm-hmm. You heard our premier say it himself at the beginning of the pandemic when he so eloquently put his foot in his mouth with his implication that minimum wage jobs aren't real jobs. Mm-hmm. The people at the bottom of the pyramid supporting those corporations are evidently not, in fact, real people worthy of real respect. Maybe we'll dive into this into another episode and give it the time it deserves. But for now, ding, 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 back to Shannon's moral issue rapid fire round. Shannon, where do you stand on, euthanasia?
Pro. I feel like if we can put our pets down, why can't we put ourselves down? This has always seemed completely fucking stupid to me. Why are we forcing terminally ill people to suffer? Fuck that. Keep your dignity.
Fair enough.
It's all my parents talk about these days. Oh, did you know so-and-so took MAID? Like,
really?
Oh, yes. Oh. Fiercely debated topic amongst the 75 plus set.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we have to look forward to.
I know.
Okay. Next up, infidelity.
Neutral.
Okay.
Sex is weird.
Yes.
But as long as it's consensual, I feel like we should stay out of other people's bedrooms. If your partner cheats on you, then that's an issue that needs to be tackled by you and your partner and no one else. Not your friends, not their friends, not even the person they fucked. You had a compact, it was broken, investigate why, and then move on one way or another.
Fair. Next one's a big one. Terrorism.
What if I said pro?
What are you going to say?
I'm going to say against.
Okay, great. Continue on.
I am against terrorism.
Thank you.
I feel self-righteous anger never goes well once it's enacted. It seems justified at the moment. However, if a bunch of disaffected people sit in caves for long enough without access to the internet, they tend to have circular arguments. I'm not the least bit afraid to say out loud that some of these people have valid points. Some of them also don't have valid points at all. Our system is flawed, and increasingly more flawed with each passing day. So I can see the temptation to throw stones or bombs at a corrupt center of the system to create unrest and satiate some of that rage. However, it's a completely ineffective technique and honestly comes off as just really fucking childish. You don't need to kill a bunch of people to make a point. Find a better way to do it. Do you think we'd still be talking about Gandhi or Rosa Parks if they were winging Molotov cocktails in a nightclub? No. No.
This next topic is maybe my favorite. How do you feel, Shannon, about civil disobedience?
Oh, yeah. See, it's your favorite because of your hippie parents, right?
Maybe.
Pro. Definitely pro. You know, nothing made me happier than seeing those college kids protesting the genocide in Gaza last spring, especially how much it pissed people off that they asked those universities to divest funds from contributing to Israel from university endowments. And I don't know if a lot of people realize that university endowments in the US are valued at around $800 billion. Yeah. Which the vigor with which they put those protests down was all about protecting that money. Those kids were very smart to shine a spotlight on that. And civil disobedience is all about hitting people where it hurts. Operating within a corrupt system means understanding that ordinary channels do not work. Gandhi, for example, marched his people to the sea to make their own damn salt. Rosa refused to move to the back of the bus, causing African Americans to boycott the buses, and the American colonialists threw the tea into the sea. Fuck your tea.
Fuck your tea.
I love this. I am pro this. Leveraging the power that you have to fight against injustice is something we should all do more of. So those are my opinions on some of the contemporary moral issues of the day. Are opinions morals?
Maybe.
I think they speak to morals. Would I fight for those above opinions? I think I would. Would I die for them? This is why in my course, it was more illuminating to shrink an issue down to something that we could actually relate to, something that we might have actually encountered in our lives personally. Those issues are not personal to a large majority of the people who are considering them, or not personal yet. Modern morality without, for example, centralizing framework of, say, organized religion or even organized communities or cultures, and fed by limitless amounts of accessible information vis-a-vis the internet, social media, ends up being more often than not opinion-based. Every argument for an issue has an equally compelling argument against. People choose to ignore some parts of an argument and just shout louder in order to win the point. Sometimes you feel like you're going insane just trying to wrap your mind around it. And I think sometimes that's the point, you know? Wedge issues are used by very powerful people like cannonballs. As long as we're angry at something that they're telling us to be angry at, then we are under somebody else's control. And sometimes I don't even bother reading the specifics about the issue. Actually, most of the time I don't bother reading the specifics of the issue. I just jump to the comment section to see which way the wind is blowing. Not a proud woman, just a woman. The problem is there is no framework. There is no centralizing agreement on even language these days, what certain words mean. Mm-hmm. There are also certainly not a lot of good role models anymore. And when the most powerful people in our world operate as nakedly corrupt, then what line are we supposed to be towing? You know, is it being a good person just for suckers? My inner cynic says yes.
It's a tough one to follow, Shannon. I'm not going to lie. I like that line, though. There are no good role models. Maybe they're just not brave enough to be speaking up.
They're just not getting the same amount of attention.
Well, there's that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it seems to me in this engagement-hungry, algorithmically driven world we live in, the only opinions that get quote-unquote platformed are the crazy ones, right? There's nothing sexy or cool about having a set of values firmly grounded in fairness and compassion anymore. Everyone's worst fear then becomes not being wrong, but being boring. So having said all of that, Anna, what about you? What is morality to you? How was your moral framework formed?
Despite the evident lack of good role models, I guess I do think of morality as a trait to be admired. And to me, it means having an objective understanding of and accountability for the impact our choices have on ourselves and probably more importantly on others. This sort of ever-evolving expression of our own integrity, responsibility, and wisdom. And I mean, we've all done immoral things and we've all lived with the consequences, even if the only evident impact of such actions is on our poor little psyches. I think my first memory of ignoring what I knew was right was to save myself from punishment. In our front yard growing up, there was an old rock wall in a small stand of beech trees. It formed a perfect little tree house with winding rock stairs between tightly spaced tree trunks. And in the quote-unquote kitchen, a small clearing at the base of the rock stairs, there was a pyramid-shaped rock, and it was perfectly placed below a strong branch so that you could jump from the rock to reach it and swing with a fair bit of momentum before launching yourself into the air for maximum height and hang time before landing. The amusement park that is living in nature. I would have been 7 years old, I think. My younger sister, who was a toddler at the time, refused to move out of my way so that I could swing from this branch. And I had warned her several times, and becoming irritated with her stubborn refusal, I launched from the tree, knocking her over and sending her flying headfirst into a large rock. Oh, yeah. Blood pouring from a gash in her eyebrow. She still has a little scar.
Oh, she still does?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I ran into my parents' house exclaiming how she had fallen and hurt herself, conveniently neglecting any mention of my own involvement. And there was something almost sinister in my understanding that she was too young to refute my story. It was a calculated risk, an almost instantaneous decision born of anger that I might get in trouble. She was being annoying, antagonizing even, and I had told her to move. I had warned her. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, maybe guilt and shame are simply the building blocks of a moral compass. I wonder if that was my first experience with my own conscience. I hadn't been honest about kicking my little sister over on purpose, and I felt bad about that. I mean, I don't think I felt bad that I kicked her. As any eldest sibling may agree, she really had it coming. But I felt bad for being dishonest about it, for pretending that I hadn't been angry with her and pretending that I hadn't meant to kick her. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So conscience is that nagging reminder to appease the internal compass, I think, to know your line and own the consequences of your actions, even if there were to be no consequences. Because conscience isn't immune to your own justification either. Like an unhappy relationship gives permission to a cheating spouse. Two wrongs may not make a right, but it certainly makes the choice easier. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, I have certainly found ways to justify my own bad behavior quite easily once I've painted myself as a victim. And I've undoubtedly ignored that inner voice just for the thrill of it, too. I mean, I don't know about you, Shannon, but there is something truly tantalizing in the taboo.
Oh, yeah. Feels good to be bad. And I mean, I think both of us have a PhD in justifying things.
Yeah. I guess we'll be delving into that, won't we? And I wrestled with how personal I wanted to get in answering this question. And I'm sure you noticed this too. One of the more challenging parts of writing for this podcast is being cognizant of not sharing other people's stories as I share my own. And in saying that, I mean, there have certainly been moments in my past where I could be accused, rightly, of being less than loyal and truthful. Periods of time marked by seemingly living in very separate realities simultaneously. So when we talk about infidelity, which is the topic I'm skirting around here, there are so many different ways to betray someone. The easiest and, dare I say, most prevalent and possibly damaging is simply checking out. Checking out of a relationship while you're still very much in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Going through the motions.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. This sort of self-doubt and loneliness masquerading some warped idea of loyalty and duty. And the payoff in living that kind of existence is in the escape. The same way you may use drugs or alcohol, you can dive into imagining whole other life paths that are often much more fulfilling and exciting than the daily challenges of a toxic or simply ill-matched relationship. Acting on those impulses, both reckless and thrilling, is short-lived and not without remorse and shame. But that being said, I really hate this adage of once a cheater, always a cheater, because it's a myth and it doesn't accurately represent context, growth, or understanding of our own motivations. So that saying and other long repeated phrases like, boys will be boys, or what's meant to be will be, or it's in his hands.
Or it is what it is.
Oh, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. It effortlessly removes our individual agency and the responsibility we need to have over our own decisions. So all that being said, if our morality is indeed shaped predominantly through our societal experiences and innate need to be included and accepted, then it stands to reason that our ability to decipher right from wrong really isn't terribly innate at all. And instead, may be informed most powerfully by the poor decisions we have made and the lessons we have learned from them. And I don't necessarily believe we're doomed to repeat our mistakes.
I love this take.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't believe we're meant to repeat our mistakes either. And I think I love that mistakes are opportunities to evolve and to grow. Nowhere else are we forced to do so but hard-won experience. And it's not easy to talk about, what we might have done wrong in life. I personally am terrible about admitting when I'm wrong about anything. But to build on our own morality, I think, it gives other permission to be honest about it. And it's by being honest about where we've gone wrong in life that those opportunities to grow really exist.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to start somewhere. That foundation has to start somewhere.
Yeah. And maybe that's how morality and spirituality dance, like a little bit of what feels right and a little bit of what feels expected. But yeah, those are probably my clearest memories of moral conundrums. But my feelings on spirituality are far less tangible, much, much less clear to me, I think.
Well, our next question tackles just that. So question 2 is, what experience has shaped your spiritual beliefs? Do you need to believe in something?
Well, my religion wasn't skiing, but I also grew up without any real traditional religious or spiritual structure. And I would attend Sunday school on the odd occasion I slept over at my grandparents' home. I remember really clearly staying in my uncle's old bedroom, the one overlooking the train tracks, waking up to a breakfast of oatmeal served with brown sugar that was spooned out of that distinctive yellow Tupperware from the 70s.
Can totally picture it.
Can you picture it? The one with the 3 separate
Yes.
Containers fused together in the center. And it was always served with a glass of orange juice from an equally plastic Woody the Woodpecker cup with my initials written on the bottom in black ink. The morning sun would spill into the kitchen and we would watch ducks swimming in the river below and cows grazing in the fields on the other side. Both my grandparents sang in the church choir, a small Baptist church in a small Nova Scotian village. I remember being intrigued by the fact that they would dress up so nicely on Sunday mornings. My grandmother would put on jewelry and hum hymns quietly to herself. My grandfather liked singing me a little silly song about a frog on the railway tracks or something. It used to make me laugh. And then I, along with my cousins, would be ushered to the church basement with the other children. Well, presumably my grandparents were participating in some elaborate production upstairs.
Oh.
Yeah.
You weren't invited.
I wasn't. And as a child, I really associated churches with weddings, picnics where the sandwiches had no crusts, and the odd Christmas concert, as though it were simply an entertainment venue.
It's not a bad way to look at it.
In our home, though, Sunday was a day for family. So we would have a call every week from Nanny and Pappy in Toronto around 10 a.m. Despite their geographic distance, these calls were the building blocks of the bond they forged with us from afar. So that every time we saw them, maybe a week or 2 at a time each year, it was like coming home. Sunday afternoons might include an adventure of sorts, especially in the years that Dad drove the old green Toyota Land Cruiser with the fluorescent green rugs on the roof. the vehicle that I demanded he would park 2 blocks away from school before he let me out. Although outside of that, it was a lot of fun. So we would frequently visit a family who lived even deeper in the woods than we did. They had a pet goat named Primrose. And
Primrose.
And a double-seater outhouse overlooking a huge gully carved into the hilly terrain of Queens County. Their property was dotted with large, movable, abstract sculptures made of metal, almost like some macabre windmill just daring you to come a little closer. Their home was art in and of itself, and I remember being intrigued by a series of evocative paintings titled Dueling Dickheads, and by ornately decorated cakes that always seemed brighter, happier, and bolder each time they were served. Christian holidays like Christmas and Easter were predominantly marked by family traditions having little to do with Jesus and everything to do with family. The annual carol sing with the local arts council, homemade Christmas cards and long letters written and received by my parents and their friends, most including pictures of their growing families. I loved sitting at the kitchen table and poring through those letters. The yearly trek into the field to pick the most imperfect tree and decorating it with a mishmash of sentimental ornaments collected throughout a lifetime. Many handmade, and my favorite being my father's hand-carved wooden star, affixed most appropriately with a wooden clothespin.
Aww.
Oh, no. Easter makes me think of green grass bordering mounds of snow protected by the spruce trees, driving bikes through spongy earth, styrofoam airplanes, and matchstick races in the roadside ditches, and, of course, the solid chocolate Easter bunny.
Yes.
With the glaring, strange yellow eyes.
I mean, what is the crucifixion of Christ without a solid chocolate Easter bunny?
Precisely. And we would acknowledge the solstice and equinoxes, maybe light a cairn in the clearing on the edge of the property to mark the changing of the seasons, or, I don't know, maybe something else entirely. I'm not sure.
I feel like it seems your parents kind of gave you a lot of options here. They left you to kind of forage your own path after exposing you to as many spiritual paths as you could potentially take. I mean, paganism clearly represented.
Sure.
Christianity. That's one thing about both of our parents. I think that while they might not have had a choice whether to attend church growing up, they gave that openness that they might have desired to their kids, So point 1 for the boomers.
Yeah, I think they did great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And still, I don't really consider myself to have a relationship to any religious belief or higher power, but I feel like I've had many moments that felt religious. Yeah. Like those moments you inexplicably feel connected to something larger, or memories of moments defined by the unexplained, uncanny, or seemingly faded. Even something like the quiet feeling of clarity when your body and mind is still in present can feel profound.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to believe that there's something deeply meaningful happening in the moments we want to believe the most, in the exhilaration of narrowly escaping catastrophe, or in the signs we seek and often find when we lose something or someone we love. I have a particularly clear memory from when I was a teenager, maybe 14 or 15 years old. My best friend and I, debating and theorizing on the existence of God, found ourselves in a large, wide open space overlooking the Annapolis Basin on the hills of Fort Anne. Heavy, dark rain clouds above us. We yelled into the sky, "Prove that you exist!" and "Come on, motherfucker!" And then, as if in response, the mighty deluge. Rain falling so hard it was difficult to see, hitting the ground with such force that it was bouncing back, falling up, not down. I remember the exhilaration in that moment, laughing and screaming and feeling so very much alive. And it wasn't that I believed anything had in fact been proven, but more so that I believed in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there really was a little magic in our world after all.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke in another episode about a car accident I'd had as a teenager, and how in that moment I had experienced such calmness and acceptance about the inevitability of death, despite my near-obsessive nature of avoiding it at all costs. And I do subscribe to the idea of a soul, in the sense of it being the presence or essence of a person, not necessarily something supernatural or everlasting. I would genuinely like to believe that my own consciousness and memory could continue on in some way beyond its connection to my body, but I don't think I do believe that, despite a sincere disbelief that I will just cease to exist. I mean, it's the same reason I read my horoscope, even though I don't really believe that the position of celestial bodies at the moment of my birth decodes my character traits and higher calling. It's simple. It's just way more fun. Sometimes it's just way more fun for me to pretend, and it's enticing to accept fated or predetermined outcomes as a reasonable explanation or reassurance that we're making the right decision. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not neurotic. I'm just a Gemini.
Oh.
I'm not a control freak. I'm just an eldest child, Shannon. And this is just a manifestation of a number 8 year, not my poor planning.
That's right.
That's right. The butterfly hovering outside my bedroom window on the morning my grandmother passed away, or the inexplicable helium balloon rising into the heavens above the horizon just as my most favorite cat was put to sleep. A shadow crossing my path that had no plausible source. I mean, I don't have to accept rational, random, coincidental, or less magical reasoning, but I tend to. If the closest thing to a higher power in my life is my own intuition or gut feeling, how do I reconcile the experiences that feel like they point to something more? So I think for me, the truth is, I want to believe in something, but I don't. I do, though, think we're hardwired to look for answers to explain our purpose in existence. Our consciousness and humanity demands it of us.
LOL. You are a Gemini.
Oh, I know.
I am a Virgo, but insane because I'm also a Sagittarius rising.
Yeah, double point for me on the Sagittarius, right?
And I agree. I think it seems like we're supposed to be grasping around in the dark and never really figuring this out. And that drive to understand what is unknowable follows every iteration of human society from the time that we were painting in caves.
Right.
It's maybe all supposed to be about the journey as opposed to getting ever to a destination.
Maybe that's it. And I guess my search for meaning had me instigating fights with rain clouds. What about you, Shannon? What moments help cement or maybe further confuse your thoughts on your own spirituality? So the question again for you.
Okay.
What experience has shaped your spiritual beliefs? Do you need to believe in something?
Okay. Well, we'll go back in time to where we left off during my 20s. I had embraced not being a quote-unquote good person as a convenient way to explain away my ability to cope and function. I was trying to come to grips with some very hard truths that I didn't really have the capacity to process or even explain the pain that I was in. I was 23 years old. And it was in this melee that I had what I would describe then as a religious experience. So it's very awkward to talk about an experience like this. If I were the listener to this podcast, my first thought would be that the person describing a religious experience was either utterly delusional or making it up for attention. So I think it's wise to be skeptical. I certainly would not be offended in the slightest if that is what you think about my story. Over time, I came away from that experience knowing that it makes absolutely no difference whether somebody believes you or not. That, like we were saying, each person's own path towards wrestling with the mysteries of our world are as unique to them as a fingerprint or a snowflake, you know? Nothing can ever be compared. So this is my story. Okay. So I was in an apple orchard on my parents' farm. I was visiting them for the weekend, and I was in the back fields getting some air, which meant probably having a cigarette. And compared to the landscaped orderliness of most of their property, the orchard had a wildness and untamed quality to it. It was a ragged collection of apple and pear trees near an old fence that led to the edge of the property line. As I walked along, I noticed a branch with ripening pears. It was September, the harvest season. And there was this little stem, and at its end, 3 fat pears clinging on. And it occurred to me, standing there staring at this, that it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I was awestruck by it, its impossibility, transfixed with how beautiful something could be pushed to its absolute limit. I kept walking, and at the edge of the property line, I kneeled down near an old fence, shaded under the jagged branches, and gazed out over our neighbor's property. Sloping down towards Georgian Bay was a mile-long field of purple flowers, probably phacelia. And as I sat there, this incredible feeling of peace washed over me, and I heard a warm and gentle voice say, "Wisdom will come with time." And in that moment, I understood at the deepest level what that meant. I had spent my entire young life trying to be the little wise one for everybody that I knew, holding it all together when inwardly I was falling apart. And the voice told me that I could stop pretending, that I was allowed to make mistakes and just not know the answer. I felt such relief. I had tears in my eyes. I stood up, and as I walked back towards the farmhouse, I was overtaken suddenly by a feeling of all I can describe as ecstatic weightlessness and total exuberant joy. That everything was good, that everything was going to be good, and that I was loved and there was nothing to be afraid of. Layers of pain and sadness and confusion melted away instantly. I will never, ever forget that feeling. I have not felt anything even close to it since. Not even on ecstasy.
I love that imagery, though, Shannon. That's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was it. That was the whole thing. It passed as quickly as it came, and I fell back down to earth, unchanged. I would have been better off, honestly, if I had simply shrugged my shoulders and said, "Whoa, that was cool," and moved on with my life. But that's just not how I am built, and sadly not what I did. And I guess the voice was right. It was time to be an idiot.
Oh, the murky morality continues.
I needed to understand the experience and try to make meaning out of it. So I ended up reading Thomas Merton and sitting in the pews of churches looking closely at stained glass. And I even attended a few church services, which were so boring I could barely sit still and could not possibly imagine why anybody would subject themselves to that. I guess you have to be grown up in it. I don't know. What I realized later was that I was clinging on to the specialness of the experience, and more specifically, my specialness, which was admittedly all about ego, which I have learned over decades that ego can really be the truest enemy to real spirituality. So yeah, the idiot phase lasted another 12 years. I really made up for lost time. The voice would have been proud. In this phase, I was mostly lost. Life was a series of stresses and failures that felt cruel and utterly pointless. I learned nothing, or if I did, I forgot it almost immediately. And I remember thinking during this period that the sitcom televisions that shows that I had grown up with, Family Ties, Full House, all of that stuff, where they learned lessons, I remember distinctly thinking, like, I haven't learned anything in like 10 years. Like nothing. I clung to hurt and pain as security blankets during this period, but had no inkling of how to move on or progress in my life in any way. I sort of clumsily floundered from one situation or one relationship, one job to the next. I was in a haze and thought maybe that's just what life was. So what did morality mean to me then? Honestly, very little. Mostly because I didn't answer to anyone but myself, and who was I to determine what was right or what was wrong? I did whatever I could get away with, and when I didn't get away with it, I simply mopped up the transgressions with lies and manipulation. I didn't feel good. My life was governed by boundaries set by fear. I was mostly afraid of being found out, of people uncovering what a selfish person I really was underneath the charade. We have many teachers in life. Fear is one, shame is another. Joy is also one. They don't all have to be negative. There are reasons. I mean, they feel like the most effective ones are, but, you know, morality and what experiences shape a person, especially one with no ingrained moral framework, end up being a vibes thing. This vibes thing, I believe, is a deep inner knowing, what people refer to as intuition. We have free will to ignore it, but it remains ever present, whispering to us in a subtlety that is impossible to hold, like grasping for the contours of a dream upon waking. When we live in ignorance of this voice, then another teacher shows up to fill in our mistakes. And there is way less subtlety when this teacher shows up. Things tend to pile up for a time and then explode.
Yes. Pile up, explode, simmer, repeat. The push and pull of thought and feeling, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that relationship is the crux of our next question. It takes some time to learn to listen to the lessons, and we're always fighting our thoughts and anxieties. We obscure what is so clear in hindsight. So, Anna, our next question, what is the relationship between morality and spirituality in your life?
Morality sounds like responsibility. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like that front-facing Sunday best of character traits, married to the stoic, unwavering consistency of conscience. It feels very personal, as though morality defines the actions that support our perspective and illustrate our integrity, the actions that reinforce our own spiritual beliefs and the connection to something greater than ourselves, something less tangible and far more mysterious. I guess I often view the natural world as the greater power associated with spirituality. When I think about connection, I think about peaceful, quiet moments alone in nature. I think about the world without the constructs of time and responsibility, like I've just zoomed out of focus and have myself blended into the sound of the ocean or the feeling of a warm breeze on my skin. Like the way, you can feel an electrical storm moving in, or how winter has its very own smell. Based on my interpretation of that connection, I do find it odd how morality can so easily belie those spiritual or religious inclinations. Should the natural world be the deity to which I subscribe, as I've said, I suspect I would be a better environmentalist. I wouldn't have rage cleaned the fridge and hidden jars I didn't want to wash in a white bag within the acceptable clear bag to dispose of, would I, Shannon? I don't know. In my worldview, at this juncture in my life, at least, morality speaks to consequence and spirituality to connection.
Oh, I love that.
Ooh.
That slaps. Morality does speak to the consequence and spirituality, the connection. I love that. It's like the morality deity is the judgy god, the paternalistic god, and the spirituality deity is the one that loves you no matter what,
right.
The mother god. I almost picture, mother, father archetypes when we look at it through that lens. It's very interesting. It also, everyone hides their shame in a kitchen catcher, Anna. You are not alone.
Not alone in the fridge rage.
No.
Yeah. Oh, the judgy god.
Stupid clear bags. Maybe people listening to this podcast don't have the garbage separation program that we do in here in Nova Scotia, but
hierarchy of colored bags.
You need a PhD to understand how to separate garbage in this province.
Have you ever got a sticker, a rejection sticker?
Yes, I have gotten a sticker.
Me too.
Not a fine, though.
No, just a sticker.
Yeah.
An orange blot on my resume with the garbage collector. Oh, we digress. What about you, Shannon? How do these two forces play out for you? Let me read that question again. We got
all
off
I can
on
think
track.
of is garbage.
I know. What is the relationship between morality and spirituality in your life?
Well, because I'm really just tackling this question in a very autobiographical way, let's go back to my idiot phase.
It's gone on for some time.
I'm still in part there. I finally decided it was time to embrace cultivating some wisdom or die. And that is when I combined those two very important forces of morality and spirituality in my life. So to me, both of those words had a very lifeless quality to them until they were combined. I understood them as faraway concepts, pillars of other people's lives, but not mine. They had ceased to mean anything in the course of my daily life. I don't think anyone listening to this would be surprised that I have a mind that is prone to magical thinking. So one day, I received what I believe was a message. So for context, things were not going well for me. Listen to our episode on sobriety for more on that.
Right.
I was angry. I was angrier than I could ever remember being and had become insular and brooding as a result. I preferred to spend my time walking alone with earphones jammed in my ears. And one morning, as I walked along the road in front of my house, a song came on my playlist that I always skipped. Rehab by Amy Winehouse.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I hated that song. I hated that fucking song so fucking much. It made me want to scream. I hated that That stupid song represented the thing that was, really torturing my mind the most, the ripping away of my dearest, truest, most loyal companion, alcohol.
Yeah.
It had begun to occur to me in the preceding weeks that my drinking was out of control. I was deathly afraid to admit this fact to myself, as I had no idea how I was going to live the life that I imagined without drinking. It was an impossible thought. So I stomped around and lived in anger and denial and skipped that fucking song.
Right.
So that day, someone or something had a different plan. And as I quickly slipped my phone from my back pocket to press my finger on the fast forward button, nothing happened. I pressed it again. Third time, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with my phone? 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 times. We're rounding the third verse of Rehab at this point. She doesn't want to drink again. Oh, she just needs a friend. And I was like, fuck. He tried to make me go to rehab and
I won't go.
Go. Song finished. I was defeated. I could have ripped the earphones out of my ears or closed the app. I knew that, but I also knew something deeper than a malfunctioning app was at play. The next song came on. I went to skip it, still holding on to some small hope that it would fail, proving to me that the app was just broken. Nope. Skipped perfectly with ease, and the next song, and the next song. The message was clear and unmistakable. It was time. God was in my cell phone, and he meant business.
That's the best line ever.
And, this time I did not bother lingering on the quote unquote specialness of having received an unexplainable message from the universe. I was long past feeling that I was special. I was more in the I'm a piece of shit camp.
Right.
Yeah. The voice was sending me a message. Things were falling apart. I could not ignore that fact for much longer. And a few weeks after this, after a particularly ugly night of drinking, I found myself on my back porch staring up into the sky, pleading with a God that I had never fully admitted to myself that I believed in, that if I stopped drinking that day for good, I would never, ever have to feel that way ever again. And a sense of calm fell over me. My life was not going to be what I thought it was, but I was going to be okay. It was time to change myself and my life for the better. So that day became my first day of real morality school. Morality school part 2, if you will. Lesson number 1, learning to do, or rather not do, something because you knew it was good for you. So giving up instant gratification. I had imagined in my pre-morality school days that this was a matter of pure discipline, but in fact, there are multiple factors at play. Discipline is certainly one of them, but being honest with yourself is an even bigger one. So is asking for help. It also involved doing things that I really didn't want to do at all, but understood were good for me in the long run. So delayed gratification without evidence of a positive outcome, what some might consider a form of faith. Delaying gratification by doing things that were good for me or for others had a side benefit that I did not anticipate. I started to feel good. And by this, I mean I started to not feel afraid and guilty all the time. I didn't have to remember any lies. I did not have to cover up any mistakes. I was not performing my life. I was living it. And this brought me to lesson number 2. Honesty is actually the best policy. And I get it if you think it sounds obvious, but for some of us, our first instinct is always to lie. We hearken back to the days of when we were children and we were counting the lies. Honesty is an exercise. It's like weightlifting, except they're not dumbbells, they're good decisions. You are the dumbbell learning how to make them. And where I encounter on opportunities to practice honesty the most is when somebody asks me to do something that I genuinely do not want to do. My mind usually launches into 18 different possible excuses like a spider web, instantaneously, crafting steadily all of the reasons that I can't do the thing. I'm sure we all do this. Yep. And then I stop myself and I ask this simple question. What if you just told the truth? I don't want to.
That's why.
Sure, you might hurt their feelings, but so would lying. Would you want somebody to do something that you asked simply out of obligation? No, you wouldn't. So don't you owe both them and yourself the truth? The answer, like all things in morality school, is so simple that it seems unbelievable, but the vibes are there backing it up. People gravitate towards people who mean what they say. I guess they call that authenticity. And authentic people are people with a firm foundation in values or morals or whatever you want to call it. They don't compromise that shit. They don't chase ego or approval or gratification by trading it on the things that make them them. And I will be the first to admit, I don't think I'm fully there yet. I am definitely a work in progress. I may always be. For some of us, it's a much higher peak to climb than others. And I have learned begrudgingly at times that pushing myself to do the thing that scares me was often all I needed to do to level up and find peace of mind. And perplexingly, the times that I was the most uncomfortable, the most ill at ease, and wanted more than anything to say, fuck it, pack my car, drive away into the sunset, preceded the most gratifying and happiest times that I've ever experienced. Shitty experiences cause us to grow. Avoiding them to maintain a steady emotional state was doing the opposite of what I thought it was. And so what I have learned is that chasing happiness is not the point. Chasing safety and comfort isn't either. The point is to open yourself up to what life has to offer and understand that you will never really be in charge of what happens. You can change your attitude, you can change your decisions, you can even change your friends and your surroundings and put yourself in the path of positivity or whatever. But as soon as that positioning veers into a lane of expectation setting, you have guaranteed your own misery. That is surrender. And it's also, for me, the intersection of where morality and spirituality meet. Do your best, and then let God do the rest. I can see the look on your face. I'm like, ooh, there it is, the G word. It's a very triggering word to many. When I was young and curious about God, because I felt that my brother and I were damned because we had been booted from the church and not baptized or christened or whatever it was, I thought, about God. I think like the way most people think about God, a very large white man with white hair and a big white beard, wearing a white linen robe, sitting on a cloud, with sun rays shooting from his omnipotent brain. That's what everyone sees, right? The God from The Simpsons.
Yeah. It'd be that and a mix of Santa. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Santa, but like in all white.
Right, exactly. Yeah, wardrobe change. That's right. Yeah.
I was able to easily opt out of any belief in a religious God because I was without religion. We, like you guys, we practice the fun holidays like Christmas and Easter, but really only from a cultural perspective. Neither one of my parents ever brought up anything to do with the Bible or mentioned Jesus once. I don't know what it's like to have God shoved down my throat. I can imagine that I would potentially be resentful of that. Probably even grow to hate the thing I was being forced to do. For me, I got to think about God however I wanted to. Most of the time, that was not at all. Other times, I prayed just in case because I was in deep shit. I will say that my openness to believe in mystery and a temptation to see magic, because magical worlds are just better,
right,
might make me susceptible to delusion. And I think it's really important to be critical, to be honest with yourself on whether or not you are just wishing for a thing to be true instead of actually experiencing it. God is not your monkey. He does not need to perform tricks. Or she. You also can't just make shit up for your own entertainment and call it your spirituality. Or maybe you can. Which leads us to our next question. Are you threatened by other belief systems, or can we coexist? How and why do you judge other people's religious or spiritual practices?
Oof, best for last, huh? Yeah. Well, as someone without any really fully formed belief system, I think I like the concept of religious and spiritual belief. And I think the guidance and principles some of those systems provide can have a positive influence on society. Predominantly, though, I can't help but view them as systems of manipulation designed to prevent us from stepping out of line. I mean, if we are unafraid of consequences in this life and what happens after the electrical impulses in our brain stop transmitting and our hearts stop pumping, then what stops us from doing whatever our animal instincts dictate?
I mean, it's the purge.
So, am I threatened by other belief systems? Yes, I absolutely am. There is no denying the existence and prevalence of violent, oppressive regimes and belief systems that actively seek the annihilation of others. There is no denying that grifters prey upon vulnerable populations desperately looking for answers, community, and acceptance. There is no denying the inherent danger in indoctrination and the destruction that wealth, greed, and power can reap. So do I judge the spiritual religious practices of others? Yeah, I absolutely do, for all the reasons I've just mentioned. And I do find it difficult to defend my sincere belief that the freedom of thought and religious choice is a fundamental human right. And it's not the right to those freedoms that I struggle with, but it's the tyranny of the people, systems, and structures that use those closely held beliefs to influence, control, and unfortunately destroy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you defend those things? You can't. How do you defend religious or spiritual extortion? Psychic frauds, cold reading audiences, obscenely wealthy evangelical preachers exploiting their congregations, or politicians feigning religious alignment for strategic gain, killing in the name of whatever God you choose. How do we manage to be so easily manipulated? I'd also like to spare myself the dive down the rabbit hole of how AI will intersect with any and all of these ideologies, or how it's becoming a religion in and of itself. I mean, are we systematically dismantling our own humanity? Part of me really thinks that the smaller and more interconnected the world gets, the harder it is for us to coexist. The greater the divide between the haves and the have-nots, the greater the self-righteousness and the greater the intolerance becomes. And all of it perpetuated by connectivity, the very thing meant to bring us together.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know me and trying to find a camp that I sit in. Sitting on either end of the divide lies our incredible need to create and share, to inspire each other, reawaken that humanity, and cooperate and restore faith in our shared condition in an ever-shrinking world. Creating is spiritual. Creating allows us to coexist. It's the beauty of a haunting melody that needs no translation, a painting of the northern lights that somehow dances on a still canvas, the movement of our bodies in a devoted practice, or the sound of laughter, that deep, goofy guffaw rising from the pit of your stomach that you just can't stifle. Just as we can create art, we can create movements and change.
I love this. This is my favorite thing that you've written.
Really?
Yeah. Creation as spirituality, I think that lands for me as being one of the more truer expressions of what it means to be spiritual, to what it means to connect, to be in the creative flow. Right. Is when I have come the closest to that feeling I had in that orchard where everything falls away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if what drives you to create positivity and goodwill in your life and others is your religious or spiritual beliefs, then that is a most wondrous thing, isn't it? So is having the courage to really see ourselves and each other as the flawed beings we are. Most of us just doing our absolute best to make sense and find meaning in all of the fucking insanity.
Good luck.
I know. It's the persistence to seek common ground even when there seems like none exists. These things allow us to coexist, but maybe only in the absence of persuasion and oversight. It's like, do you remember when you were a kid and outside of school you were really close friends with this strange, weird, nerdy girl, but pretended not to notice her when you were with your clique?
Yep.
Or maybe you were like me and you were the strange, weird,
oh no, that was a trap.
Yeah, and you just never knew where you stood with others. But this is our nature, to fit in and to be accepted, even if it means doing something we know feels wrong. Those stakes are much, much higher for many, and they include survival. So when freedom, life, and liberty are under attack, the idea of coexisting might be nothing more than an absurd farce. So am I threatened? Maybe, yeah. Ambivalent? Most definitely. What camp do you fall into, Shannon? Threatened, ambivalent, something else entirely? How do you answer the final question? Are you threatened by other belief systems, or can we coexist? How and why do you judge other people's religions or spiritual practices, Shannon?
Well, I guess before commenting on other people's spiritual belief systems, it's probably high time to discuss my own. It's probably more accurate to describe them as more spiritual theories drawn from a mixture of my lived experience as well as influenced by the things that I've read, studied. And also, I don't know if I've mentioned that I am a citizen of the nation of TikTok. It's sort of like an angry sack of ideas that is ever changing. Sometimes an idea gets thrown in, sometimes one gets removed, and it's my own intuition that acts as a judge here. Discernment coupled with an openness to new ideas, creating two pillars to which a gateway to understanding opens up. So something that feels right, that I consider and ultimately allow through that gateway, creates in my mind the image of something locking into place. That something that was once blurry, suddenly clarified and bright. That song by Amy Winehouse, confirming what I knew to be true, is a good example. What some might refer to as a paradigm shift.
Right.
So paradigm shifts can happen within different realms. I've been in therapy on and off since I was 17 years old, and the insights that I have gained into different ways of looking at or handling situations have healed me. Like a rat finally emerging out of a maze, sobriety and working a 12-step program has elicited many paradigm shifts in my life, taking me from honestly a miserable, angry person to one that is, always a work in progress, largely speaking at peace with myself and the circumstances of my life. Sometimes shifts in my own perspective are sudden, and sometimes they are hard won over many years about thinking about a thing one way and then suddenly realizing that there is another way, usually simpler, that I had never considered. And I'm suddenly liberated from an old limiting belief system and can approach my life differently or let go of something that had kept me stuck. So delayed gratification, choosing the hard but noble path, courage, honesty, this alchemy has produced some of the most joyous moments of my life where I truly felt the presence of a higher power working in my life, where things started to feel magical.
Right.
And so before I go into my spiritual understanding of the universe, I want to preface this with, I don't know if anyone ever watched the documentary Going Clear about Scientology, where they were interviewing the director, Paul Haggis, and he had ascended to, I forget what it was, like a Thetan 3 level or whatever. And they finally rolled out the thing about, the, I have to go back and.
The aliens?
Yeah, the aliens. And Paul Haggis is talking to the documentary guy, and he's like, I was sitting there like, what the fuck? Is this a test? If I believe this, I don't deserve to get into your religion. He couldn't believe it. So I just want to preface this, but it's a little bit wild. So just hang on. Let's go for a little bit of a ride. The paradigm shift that happened when I was 23 years old in that orchard had this effect on my life, although it took me many years to realize it. What I experienced that day with that weightless, ecstatic feeling was what some might refer to as universal consciousness. The information that I gathered in that split second told me this: there is nothing to fear.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's the same one from when I stood in the rain yelling into the heavens and when I took my hands off the wheel of my little out-of-control Ford Tempo. It's peace.
Peace.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we live in a 3D world with a human brain that is kind of like a tool for interpreting experience. Think of those VR headsets. The headset brain is thinking, the body is sensing with the five senses and your gut and your heart and nervous system. And those two entities are communicating with each other to interpret and create a story of what is happening. It's basically a spaceship shaped like a human.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
So what we think of as reality is really a subjective interpretation based on the tools at our disposal. Okay? So I learned this idea in literary criticism class in university. The postmodernist concept of Roland Barthes that the author is dead, that our interpretation of the text is not bound by the intention of the author. So this is a good time to talk about ego. So in my thinking, your ego is your operating system that the ship relies on to navigate the world it's encountering. Your ego wants you to go in a certain direction, to stay on course, to make certain decisions because its chief priority is to survive and maintain the ship. You know, what some refer to as creating homeostasis. So in biology, homeostasis is the state of a steady internal physical and chemical conditions maintained by living systems. So this is the condition of optimal functioning for the organism that includes many variables such as body temperature, fluid balance, being kept within certain preset limits. Why our ego likes a condition of homeostasis is also the same reason that your ego might betray you at certain points in your life, when the ego starts to rely on what it gets used to. This includes limiting beliefs about your abilities and the power you have over your own circumstances. So sometimes that's various addictions, relationships, feelings of comfort, or feelings of power, supremacy. Where people navigate into dark places in their life can sometimes be attributed to allowing the ego to make the decision or feel the feelings. When your operating system takes over and you think you are your operating system, instead of the passenger riding along in the ship observing. Still following me?
I am still here.
So what about the unseen messages that we receive that come from seemingly nowhere? What about intuition and sensing somebody's vibe? Where do those come from? How do we just know that a dude is creepy? Or somebody is mad at us? Or that two people who just entered a room had a fight? We emit an energy field that projects our feelings and a distinct vibration or frequency in a sort of unseen cloud around us. And our cloud interacts with other people's clouds, other people's energy fields. Some of us are porous and let other people's energies influence us or absorb what isn't ours. Some of us project our positivity out like a brilliant sunbeam, attracting wondrous things into our field. And some of us suck people's energies right out of them, pulling them into a toxic pit or void. Some of us have to work on elevating this energy, raising our frequency by being open to learn and grow and to being honest. And some of those hard-won experiences that bring us along into growing into somebody that is at peace with who we are. And that takes work and it takes self-love. So your operating system or your ego tries to navigate through life by predicting future possibilities. It does this by relying on data gathered in past experiences. So this has the effect of trying to force outcomes by predicting what will happen in every situation. When you live only in the past and in the future, you are no longer co-creating your experience with your passenger, and the ride tends to get bumpy. So the magic of our reality is in the present, because now is the only reality, and we create it as we observe it. So this is the only place where we have agency, and yet it is often overlooked completely. The operating system can only detect experiences along linear time, but the passenger knows differently. The passenger has powers that the operating system does not. The passenger can sense the unseen field of vibration around it, and the passenger knows that linear time, like the operating system itself, is just a tool for understanding the universal consciousness. So who is your passenger? Or what some refer to as your observer. In my spiritual belief system, the passenger is you. You are an infinite soul who is having a human experience in order to grow and learn from it. Your observer is your own personal fractal of light, of the universal consciousness, a part of the infinite whole that connects us all. Still with me?
So far, yes. Although I now have an Iggy Pop song stuck in my head, but please continue.
I think,
and I'm just going to interject there.
Sure.
I respond with levity and humor a whole lot, especially when I feel ill-equipped to understand where somebody's coming from. But I really enjoy trying. So keep going.
All right. I think the biggest spiritual leaders of our time are going to be quantum physicists. What they are learning through that field is that the tiniest building blocks of what makes up our universe, which are something called wave patterns, once they observe a thing, they transform it from a probability of multiple different possibilities into a particle. So matter. The building block of reality in our observable universe. So it's actually the observation of the thing that creates the reality. We often hear about people talking about manifestation, which sounds really fucking woo-woo, but I think there is actually a basis for this in quantum physics. And there is also a scientific basis for the crazy thought that we are living in a simulation.
Okay.
Cards on the table.
Yep.
I think that, my soul and everybody else's has traveled through many human experiences. And I think it's very possible that certain groups travel together in what can be thought of as learning pods or soul groups, appearing in each other's experiences as different characters along the way. Plato was the first to come up with this. And certain New Age spiritual thinkers and past life regressionists like Dolores Cannon have continued to expand on this belief system. It appears in Buddhism, where it was thought that we kept going through a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth in a continuous cycle of suffering called samsara until our souls were liberated into what's called nirvana. In Hinduism, it appears they do the same thing, eventually achieving what they refer to as moksha. Monotheistic religions typically reject the idea, but I think, to be honest, what I observe is that has more to do with control. You talk about systems of manipulation.
Right.
Well, they want your one life to stand alone as a single judgment so that they can terrify you with thoughts of not sinning. The afterlife in their thinking is a permanent state, and it could be perfection on a cloud with some virgins thrown in to boot, or it could be hellfire and torture for eternity.
With all of your best friends.
That's right. I'll save you a table. See, in the monotheistic conception, time is linear. You get one life, you're born, you live, and you die. In Eastern religions, time is a cycle going round and round and round until you break free and liberate yourself. But what does it mean to liberate? If we're infinite souls, what or where exactly do we liberate to? I think this is when you hear a lot of people talking about when they speak of ascension. Have you heard about people talking about ascending?
I have.
So to ascend means to rise, right? Remember last week when everyone thought the rapture was going to happen? That was hilarious. Anyway, that's a sort of concept of to rise, but rise where? Do our bodies just suddenly lift off the ground, no longer subject to the rules of the 3D world? Perhaps. This is where quantum physics starts to make this picture seem pretty interesting. What if we were only here visiting the 3D world and actually were a fourth or fifth dimensional being, or even a sixth or seventh dimensional being? Stay with me. Things are going to get weird. What if our human experience in a 3D world, subject to the constructs of space and time, is a shadow, cast from a higher dimension, a holographic matrix of light that is being projected from a being or consciousness that exists in a higher realm? Think about how in our 3D life, we cast a 2-dimensional shadow when the light hits our being on the ground.
Right.
So we can impact the movement and shape of that 2D shadow, but that shadow cannot impact our 3-dimensional form.
Correct.
So think that what if we are the shadow that's being cast by a 4th-dimensional version of ourselves? The shadow bends and distorts as we move through space and time. The shadow does not influence us. Only we influence the shadow. So if we are here as a fallen fractal of light, of a much higher consciousness that exists in a plane of existence that we're not yet capable of detecting, what if our 3D human experience is that shadow cast by our higher self, and we're here to work to integrate that shadow, to ultimately bring it into light in order to leave this dimension and to ascend or rejoin with our higher self. So, in essence, to liberate. So, this shadow world is basically a simulation or a matrix created by the universal consciousness to facilitate traveling souls or fractals of consciousness to level up, to try to venture out of this matrix and reintegrate into the light of who we really are. So to break that unending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. So how do we merge? How do we come out of the shadow and into the light? We merge by raising our vibration or our energy field so that we match the frequency of the higher dimension. So we essentially pick up its signal or match what quantum mechanics would describe as its subatomic frequency. Everything we observe is just a light wave slowed down to a particular frequency. Once we match frequencies of the higher dimension, we are no longer bound by the reality of what we are observing in a 3D world. The constructs of that dimension fall away. So, for thousands of years, human beings have been told stories of superhuman beings that exist on our earth. In Egyptian, Norwegian, Greek, and Roman times, we had mantles of gods and goddesses with supernatural powers. In biblical times, we had figures that were messengers from God himself. The early Middle Ages, there was Picts, fairies, sorcerers, and of course, witches. Consider for a moment that superhuman ability is accessible to all of us. We just need to let the limitations of our 3D world fall away and realize what we actually are. And nowhere have I seen this better explained than in that scene from The Matrix. And I don't know if you ever watched The Matrix, but...
Would you believe me if I told you I hadn't?
What?
I've never watched The Matrix.
I know what we're doing after this.
Okay.
So there's a scene in the movie where the character played by Keanu Reeves, Neo, is talking to this very gifted boy. I'll call him Spoon Boy.
Okay.
Spoon Boy says, "Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." And Neo says, "What is the truth?" And Spoon Boy says, "There is no spoon." Neo says, "There is no spoon?" Spoon Boy says, "Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends. It is only yourself." That is what, to me, feels true. That is the end of my spiritual understanding of the universe. You're welcome, Internet.
I know it's tough because you can't see our faces. I can't describe what mine looks like right now. It's just kind of, I was saying to Shannon earlier, I'm just not equipped. It would take me so much time to dive into this and see where you're coming from.
Well, look, I'm going to tell you this. Number one, I didn't come up with this.
Okay.
I'm certainly not alone in this. There is an explosion of different versions of this premise being pimped all over the internet. I think, to be honest, we are on the precipice of a new understanding of how the universe actually functions. And it will call into question everything that we think we know about what existence means. And I think there are some people who are maybe desperately trying to distract us from grabbing this particular apple off that particular tree of knowledge and taking a big bite. What I've learned about this kind of stuff, though, is that you need to pick your audience. Or, talk about it to a bunch of people that you've never met on a podcast. Isn't this fun, Anna?
It is fun. It is fun.
Just as I would definitely not enjoy, somebody who was a Christian espousing the virtues of Jesus or his love for me, I don't offer this viewpoint or belief system to anyone in casual conversation. Why? Because number one, most people would think that I was fucking nuts. And number two, it would make them really uncomfortable. There is nothing to prove with your own personal belief system, so why campaign it? I'm not recruiting. I don't need anyone to agree with me. It doesn't matter what other people think. If you've listened to my point of view on this episode or in some of our other episodes, you might think of me as fucking nuts already. So, I can be gullible, searching, love conspiracy theories, feels the world is fucked. I would be a prime target for a cult. But I hold these ideas light in my heart. I have a core, intuitive, deeply tender notion of what feels true, and that is what guides me, what whispers. The warm and gentle voice in that orchard, that was my higher power, observer of my ship, my guide, myself. That is who I build my relationship with on this magical journey through life. Beyond knowing that, I am comfortable being wrong or surprised. Maybe we're all going to be surprised. Maybe the answer to the ultimate question of life in the universe and everything is like in Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's just the number 42. Maybe. And so to the second part of the question, if I'm being honest, what offends me is the rigidity or certainty with which people approach their religious or spiritual belief systems. I get it, but I find it off-putting. I feel there is no more dangerous force in this world than certainty. Actually, greed. Greed's number one. Then
We've established that, yeah.
Certainty is a close second. How can you know the unknowable? To me, that is the first indication that you are either delusional or selling me something. Spiritual beliefs should not come with price tags. They do not need to make quotas. They don't need other people to believe them in order to make them more true. This is where I think a lot of people have drifted away from organized religions to the more laissez-faire spirituality of our modern era. People don't want to be told what to do or what to think. And while people's faiths should be respected as they form, a fairly important foundation for how people navigate this world, I think that what we've realized is that a lot of us thought that passenger in our little human spaceship was either a judgmental God or just an empty ship. But what we've come to understand is that the passenger is us. We are part of this God or the universe or whatever. And more importantly, all part of one another, connected in our journey. And once we stop externalizing this to a big God on high guy or just a series of random and meaningless events that emerge from the void and lead nowhere, we stop giving our power away and our life. We let go of our limitations. And this can be a very dangerous idea. And you know how much I love danger.
I do know how much you love danger.
So this is my set of rules when it comes to judging other people's spiritual belief systems. Okay. All right? I will judge you when you use your belief systems in the following negative ways. 1, to tell me mine is less legitimate or anybody else's. 2, to oppress women. 3, to control people. 4, to exclude people. 5, to abuse people. 6, to incite violence. 7, to take my money or anyone else's. And 8, to judge people's choices. If personal belief systems can follow those, I think, simple rules, will coexist just fine. And if not, look out.
Look the fuck out.
Look the fuck out, motherfucker.
Shannon, you've given this question much thought. Your comprehensive spiritual understanding of the universe is not our usual dinner party chatter or even our late night poolside banter. I love that you went all in on that question. And I love that we don't have to believe in the same things or in any things, or even in my case, have any rudimentary understanding of the things. To truly enjoy talking to each other about it and respect each other's take.
I mean, at the end of the day, You have to hold these ideas light in your heart and take what resonates and leave what doesn't, and allow yourself and others the freedom to explore all their thoughts without somebody telling you that it's a zero-sum game. Everyone gets to be in the God boat.
Yes.
Or the non-God boat.
The boat.
The boat. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next time on The Assignment.